Hi, I'm Christina.
And I'm Jacob.
We are Green Badger Games.
So, little history. Back in 2009, Christina and I met. She had never played Magic the Gathering at that time, and I said, sure, I'll teach you. So, we played that for a few years.
We got addicted to it. I couldn't wait to build my own deck. Yes, it is addicting. It's a very addicting habit. That's why a lot of people buy trading card games, because it's addicting. But, shortly after we had gotten married in 2010, my brother actually introduced us to a game from Flying Frogs called Last Night on Earth. Our minds were blown. We had no idea board games could be like this. We continued to play that game since we bought it for ourselves. And eventually we found out that Flying Frog did another game called Touch of Evil. So we bought that game too. And those games hit the table often. Magic was kind of starting to take a back seat at this point.
And then in 2011, we discovered it's a tiny convention, it takes place up in Indy called Gen Con. And we live in southern Indiana. It's a hop, skip, and a jump for us. So we've been going there, we went there, we saw all the games, saw all the things, realized that there was new things that we didn't even know about, and have been going ever since.
Yeah, and so actually Gen Con continued to be an adventure for us every year. And we got inspired about 10 years ago. So right now, the recording of this video, it's 2023. So it's about 10 years ago, about the 2012, 2013 range, we came up with Green Badger Games. So this is not a brand new thing. It's not really had a whole lot of action. In that first year, and the only year that we did it until now, we actually worked on a board game called Earth 2. And so that was something we started working on and just kind of collected dust ever since.
Yeah, as a lot of things tend to do.
Unfortunately.
And while we were working on creating that board game, we met a local couple. They did board game reviews and news. And so we actually joined forces with them, helped them in their venture to do some reviews, and even did a little tiny bit of a podcast. It didn't last super long on the podcast, that's for sure.
Yeah. And then eventually, I'd mentioned that we had stopped working on our game. In fact, I think we kind of stopped while we were working with them on their board game reviews. And eventually we stopped doing board game reviews and writing news too. Instead, we just continued to focus on playing games and just enjoying life.
And then what happened recently? Let's see, my cousin has actually joined Dice Tower as, a reviewer of games, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that have seen him. And I know there's a whole thread on BGG asking who he is. So, for those curious, Joey. So I can give you the scoop on the poop for him, but but in him doing that, it inspired us to actually take off the dust off of Earth 2 and this whole review that we had done before, and kind of get back into the fray.
And this time under Green Badger Games, our own review and everything. Well, now that you've got a chance to kind of know a little bit of our gaming history, kind of the history of this company that's been shelved for 9 years, let's dive into kind of our top 5 as of this video getting recorded in 2023. We are at the end of May when we are recording this. So, of course, in the next few months, as we continue to get new games in and Gen Con happens, we might have new favorite 5s. But we do have a current 5 top list that we do want to share with you now, so you kind of get an understanding as to the type of games that we like. Well, Jacob, would you like to get us started on what is your number 5?
Sure. Well, actually, I'll take a step back in the annals of history here. As Christina had mentioned before, when we got into gaming, one of the games that we had played was Last Night on Earth. Last Night on Earth is a really fun game, and for those of you that don't know it, it's kind of the one versus many mechanic where you have a player as the zombies and everybody else as the survivors. While we really enjoyed that game, there was just a little piece that was missing for us, and it actually was eventually released by Cool Mini or Not and Guillotine Games at the time, and that would be Zombicide. So, one of the things that we enjoyed about Last Night on Earth was working together to try to fight off the zombie horde. One of the things we didn't necessarily like on it was the super smart zombies that could run around, and we thought zombies should be a little more instinctual. Well, that's the gap that Zombicide filled for us, where we're all working together and the zombies are actually controlled by their own AI. And then, Christina, what's your top fifth?
My top fifth. My top fifth.
Your top fifth.
The fifth one on my list is actually by Orange Nebula Games, and it's called Unsettled. We actually kickstarted the first Unsettled and the one that gave us the expansions. So we're eventually going to have everything for the game as far as the expansions.
All the shinies.
I am a bit of a Trekkie, and so this kind of fits that feel for me. You feel like you're in a away team that's landing on the planet, and you have to do some type of missions. Objectives are extremely hard to do in the game. It is a cooperative game, which is our favorite gameplay style. We'll play other games, but if it's cooperative, it's most likely going to be something that perks our ears a little bit more than a competitive game might.
So, quick spoiler alert, by the end of this list, you'll see how she talks about co-op games being our favorite. You'll be able to kind of glean. Number 4 for me would be Escape the Dark Castle, and this is by Themeborn. Basically, it's a heavy thematic game, kind of an RPG in a box, dark fantasy. I mean, you could almost go back to AD&D when you think about it, where each room card you flip over might be your last.
Yeah, and Escape the Dark Castle, just kind of building on that one a little bit. We love to play that game regardless, but it seems like for some reason if we lose power because of a storm or whatever, that becomes the game that we want to play by candlelight. It just feels great, like the theme works.
Especially by candlelight. In fact, there's been a few times I've thought about flipping a breaker just to play it.
Oh, we could. That sounds fun. Friday night plans?
I'll be back.
Well, my number 4 is actually kind of repeating what Jacob had. Yes,
repeat?
I know, you copied me, I think.
No, you copied me.
Zombicide. And when I say Zombicide, like, we own the regular first edition, we own the second edition, and we own Black Plague. So really, for me, those are all Zombicide. Even though they're individually different games, it's all the same basic kind of mechanics. And I could pull any one of those 3 off the shelf, and I'm happy. I will say the rules are a little better on second edition Zombicide than first edition, especially when it comes to shooting. Shooting was kind of crazy in the first edition.
Let me shoot my buddies, all my friends first, and then I'll go for the zombie. Because, the zombie didn't cheat me out of tacos last week.
What's your number 3, Jacob?
Oh, my number 3. That would be Sherlock Files, Indie Board and Cards, I believe. Where you have different mysteries you have to solve. Like, there's one where you have flight recording and you have to figure out, well, why did this plane go down? Or, well, hey, somebody escaped from prison, but how did they actually escape? And you compare yourself at the end to Sherlock. Now, I know some of you sitting there going, oh, Sherlock, well, consulting detective, I've played that. It's all the same game. The nice thing about this one is it's all self-contained, and it's super simple to hit the table. All it is one deck of cards. And the comparison to Sherlock, unlike games like Consulting Detective, is more scaled down. So even if you are Inspector Lestrade, you don't feel bad for being Inspector Lestrade.
That makes sense. Yeah. So I would say my number 3, and this one is kind of bounced around in the top 3 all the time, is Takenoko. This is a competitive game, so this is where I kind of break out of like these cooperative games that we really love, and I still love cooperative games. But Takenoko is one of those competitive games where you're going after your own objectives and you're not really messing with anybody else. It's not got the screw your neighbor cutthroat mechanics. So I really appreciate that. And also, the panda is so stinking cute. I personally, when I'm playing the game, one of the things you can do is you can make the gardener grow, you can put out plots, or you can have the panda eat. And probably 9 times out of 10, I'm going for the panda to eat. Anywhere I can get him to move and eat, that's what I do.
Not 9 times out of 10. Are you sure on that?
Yeah.
I figured it would have been 11 out of 10.
Yeah, it probably is 11 out of 10. He's so cute.
Just saying. I mean, every single time Panda eats, you know you're gonna hear nom nom.
Yeah,
nom nom.
I do that. Yeah, a lot.
That panda just suffers from nom nom nom. Let's see, number 2 now. Man, we're climbing. My number 2 would be Mysterium.
Ooh.
And this one is it's another co-op. I mean, no, I'm not going to go into any spoilers on my list. It's one where you have a single player playing as the ghost, and people are trying to figure out who did this murder years ago that this ghost was framed for. And it's like, I guess, a cooperative Clue cranked to 11.
Yeah.
And where it's a very abstract, you play cards, and the ghost has to figure out how to get the clue to the player, and the player has to figure out what the ghost is trying to tell them, all without communicating what you're actually doing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very mind game when you think about it.
And one thing to know, our copy of Mysterium is not a copy that is regularly available in the United States.
No, fun story about that one. I actually had to reach out to the creators of the game and get it shipped all the way overseas. There was emails back and forth until finally I was able to get my grimy hands on that copy. And it has remained on the shelf ever since. No, take that back. It's not remained on the shelf. There's no dust on that game. It gets played often.
Yeah, and I want to say it was probably, a couple years after we bought, because the Ukrainian version is what we bought, that the American version was released later.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have played that one. It's pretty much the same. There is some differences.
I will say that screen that it comes with is...
Yeah.
Oh.
That's a sweet component.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if anyone has a screen they want to get rid of that'll work with the base game, you can feel free to contact me.
Yeah. Well, my number 2 is another competitive game, and that's Wingspan.
She's so competitive.
I love birds. We have a bird feeder in our backyard. I enjoy feeding the birds and watching the birds. And this game kind of feels like you're collecting these birds. You're kind of attracting them to your environment. And it's kind of like the idea of Takenoko, where you're doing your own thing, and while you may be able to build off of what somebody's going to do, you aren't able to take over what they're doing or harm their victory points in any way, unless you just got something that they wanted and you had no idea they wanted it. But it's a very peaceful game. It's one of those I like to just put on some peaceful music and just enjoy playing, just building this engine of these beautiful birds. The artwork is gorgeous. We bought some really nice organizer for it on Etsy, and we'll probably continue to upgrade the components because it's just one that hits the table a lot. It doesn't collect dust either.
No, it probably needs eventually sleeved, but we'll see on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we get to number 1, let's take a little step back and do a couple honorable mentions that we want to have. Just things that didn't necessarily make it in the top 5, that they would be within our top 10, maybe even top 20. Just games that we both thoroughly enjoy. And one that I'm going to mention is Suro. So anyone that's played it, it's the game of the path. And what you do is you place tiles and everyone is actually working against each other. You're wanting to be the last one standing, and there's actually quite a few different versions of the game.
Mm-hmm.
The first one was just called Suro, and then you had Suro of the Sea that introduced dragons, Dakaju. I hope I pronounced that right. If I didn't, well, sorry. And then there was Phoenix Rising. So, and all play basically the same with some upgraded mechanics.
Mm-hmm. I would say, and this is kind of building off of what you had earlier, Escape the Dark Castle is one of my mentions.
Oh, you repeater.
I guess so. It's a great game. We've already kind of touched on why it's a great game, but it definitely is on my list.
Another one that would be on my honorable mention list is Tales of the Arabian Night, or Nights, actually. And for those that haven't, it's a storytelling game. Now, it's another one, it's competitive. You want to be the first one to reach your destiny and your story. But it's one of those games, I'd heard it best described years ago, where it's not about winning, it's about the story that's told.
Agreed, yeah. There's a lot of fun stories in that one.
Yeah, Drinking the Storm, as an example. By the way, unless you want to become a fugitive, don't do it.
And tricking a lovesick genie.
You heathen!
I know. I'm a little chaotic in games.
It's like the ocean's a little wet.
Yeah. Well, another one of my mentions is Mansions of Madness. That is a really great game. It has this very great stories in each one. And the nice thing is you get to know the difficulty for each one that you're going to play. You also get to know kind of like the length of time, so depending on how much time you have to devote to that game. You could play some of the same stories each time, and there's always going to be some differences. So it doesn't always feel like you're playing the same stories over and over again. It's super approachable. The turns are just simple actions just to kind of do different things. But it's kind of figuring out where to go and what to do, and fighting the monsters and having the right kind of equipment to do it, and do things in a timely manner, because there is some kind of internal clock, and since it's being ran by an app, it gets to be that GM for you. It gets to tell you what's going on, and you just simply go around trying to escape the madness and stop all the different Lovecrafts of monsters from coming out. It's a great game.
Alright, so now as we go into our number one, let me start off by saying they're not the same.
No.
But there's a little similarity. So why don't we start with yours?
With mine?
Yes.
Okay. So Pandemic is my absolute favorite game. It's never really been knocked off of that throne once it got there. We have the anniversary edition. We have had all the expansions, but decided just to stick with the original. Sometimes original is just best. It is a game that, for us, is a gateway game to teach other people. It wasn't a gateway game for us, but we're constantly bringing it to people who haven't really played much in the way of board games. And even some people who have played board games, and about everybody we show the game to, they're in love with it. Like, its mechanics are very simple, but there's a lot of strategy, and you get to work together as a team. There's a lot of times that this game is considered like one of the top 10 to play with your spouse, and we can attest to that.
Oh yeah.
That game is a game we always pull off the shelf. And we have even the smaller Hot Zone version. And I have an app on my phone. Like, it's a game that you can play in a lot of different ways, and you're going to have fun.
So now to where the similarity is. My number one is Defenders of the Realm. That is Pandemic-like. In the reason that you have a centralized location, Monarch City, that you are trying to save from all the evil generals that are coming your way. You've got the dragon, an ogre, a demon, and an undead, and they're all just vying to destroy you. So you are running around as fantasy characters and completing quests, defeating minions, and just trying to eventually defeat all 4 generals. As the game goes along and you start defeating these generals, it gets more difficult. They start moving faster. The war starts getting longer and starts wearing you down. But it's just it's fun.
Oh yeah.
And it is technically competitive.
Yeah.
By one of the main rules, it's actually a semi-cooperative game because the way you win is by defeating all 4 generals, and then the king's champion is selected by whoever dealt the final blow to the most generals.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that is one rule we actually skip, mostly because it's usually difficult enough to actually survive.
Yeah, yeah. And I would say kind of like Pandemic in the sense of that you're trying to kind of watch the resources to make sure that you don't deplete the minions.
Yep.
And in Pandemic, you're trying not to deplete the disease cubes. There's multiple ways to lose, and only one way to win.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely where they're a lot similar, but they're a lot different too.
Oh, yes.
Which makes it to where they're worthy to stay on our shelves and in our top 1 spots. Oh, behind us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that covers our top 5 and a little bit of our history.
Gives a little information so all of you out there in Internet-topia can kind of learn what you think of us, and as we talk about things later on, kind of know where we're coming from and if what we say you like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're planning on doing some reviews, some news. We're going to have free resources if anybody wants to contribute to any of those things. News, reviews, free resources, whatever. This is
resources.
Yeah, this is a community effort. It's starting with the 2 of us, but we are opening the doors to anybody else who wants to join us.
Mm-hmm.
The only request is that you keep it family friendly, because we want to make sure that kids can watch this and families can play games together. There's enough adult content on YouTube and everywhere else. I think it's good to have something that fits for the whole family to watch.
So stay a while and listen.
Well, that's all. Thank you very much for watching, and keep tuning in to us.
We'll catch you next time.
Bye.